Thank you, Pınar. Welcome to the Italian Design Days online architectural design panel. First of all, I would like to thank the Italian Consulate of Istanbul and Bilişim Vadisi. We will have speeches which will make a valuable contribution from our panelists today. But before that, I want to briefly mention some information about the development of Italian-Turkish art and design cooperations, interactions in Istanbul. The presence of Italians in these lands, which started with the migration to the northern bank of Golden Horn in the 10th century in order to conduct maritime trade, continued throughout the entire period of Ottoman Empire and enabled them to continue their lives comfortably thanks to the commercial freedom and freedom of belief granted to them. By the order of Mehmet the Conqueror, Ottoman fabrics began to be shipped to France, England, Germany, Sweden, Poland and Scandinavia via Italy by merchants from Venice and Genoa. Architecture was one of the biggest contributions of the Italians to this culture. Works of Andrea Gritti, Giulio Mongeri, Raimondo Daronco and Semprini are great examples. Many of them also decorated with dozens of works by Italian architects. Some existing exemplary buildings like the Ottoman Bank, the Butler Apartment, the Mongeri House, the Hagia Sophia Restoration and Naum Theatre are also the ones to mention. Galata Tower, one of the most iconic urban symbols of Istanbul, was rebuilt by the Genoans within the scope of Galata Walls. After the earthquake in 1509, the building was rebuilt by architect Murat bin Hayrettin, one of the famous architects of his time. The architect of today's tower is Köksal Anadolu. Therefore, Galata Tower can also be considered as a huge example of Italian-Turkish design cooperation. In addition to the architecture and design, palace musician Giuseppe Donizetti composed the most beautiful marches of the Ottoman army, and Fausto Zanoro, the palace painter of Abdülhamit II, transferred the most impressive panoramas of Istanbul to his canvas. We want to continue this tradition of cooperation interaction extending from the past to the present within the Italian Days we organize as the Turkey side. As you all know, this year's theme is New Challenges for the Sustainable Restart of Made in Italy. And I am standing on a venue of firsts in the name of Design and Architecture of Turkey, Mimar Sinan Fine Arts University. Mimar Sinan Fine Arts University, which has been operating as the first educational institution of the country in the field of arts, architecture and culture, still hosts leading accredited and internationally validated programs in a wide range of skills in spatial design in the fields of architecture, interior architecture, industrial design and urban planning from bachelor's degree to PhD. In this body, our guest panelists will share valuable information with us today regarding the main theme of Italian Design Days from architecture perspective. Dr. Instructor Stefano Salata, Associate Editor of Italian National Reports Ecosystem Service Partnership and National Research Center on Land Take Italy, and İstek City and Regional Planning Department member. Istanbul Bilgi University Faculty of Architecture Dean Professor Dr. Zuhal Soy will with extensive studies on digital design calculation laboratories, fabrication and prototyping laboratories, contemporary city, architecture and design culture researches, seminars and workshops. And last but not least, Cristiano Lucetti, curator of Egyptian Pavilion, which was shortlisted in the World Architecture Festival 2018 projects exhibited category at the 2018 Venice Architecture Biennale. So our first panelist, Dr. Stefano Salata, will present us designing performance-based solutions to reduce ecosystem vulnerability. Before I give the word to him, I want to mention him first with his bio. He was born in Grado. Stefano Salata is PhD in Territorial Government and Urban Design, 26 cycle at the Department of Architecture and Urban Studies, Politecnico di Milano. He is Assistant Professor of Ecological Planning at the Izmir Institute of Technology, Turkey. He has been a research technologist of the Inter-University Department of Regional and Urban Studies and Planning, Politecnico di Torino, and worked on the project EU Life SAMP 4CP for the same department. He worked at the intersection of ecosystem service assessments and urban planning, and his actual research focuses the examination of how to increase the sustainability and resilience of urban system in the face of climate change. His interests concern both the theory and practice of urban and territorial planning. He is a member of Ecosystem Service Partnership and a member of National Research Center on Landtake, Italy. He is also the co-editor of Italian national reports on landtake of CRCS and author of many empirical research, scientific international journals. Now the word is yours, Dr. Stefano.
Thank you very much for your extremely detailed presentation. Thank you. So thank you again, Professor, for this introduction. And I would like to say thank you even to the other invited panelists, because it will be like a reaching experience to meet each other, discussing all our fields of research. And I would say thank you even to my rector, because he was contacting me for this opportunity in order to represent the ITSTEC here at Italian Design Day. So I'm going to talk shortly about designing performance-based solution to reduce ecosystem vulnerability. During your introduction, you talk about urban planning as a field of research. And actually, I would like to present something which is more linked to the broad assessment of cities, while I think that the next speech will concern more the architectural solution linked within buildings and so on. Nevertheless, I'm going to talk the possibility to bridge, the gap between theory of science and the practical knowledge linked within the possibility to employ urban design rules to reduce the vulnerability of cities. But when we talk about cities, actually, we have to take into account that we are dealing with extremely complex and extremely modified systems. What we call city is a kind of megalopolis, or they call it Anthropocene era, in order to say that the physical dimension of cities does not correspond anymore to the administrative dimension. So it means that there is like a not matching solution from the possibility to govern the systems and how the systems behave biophysically. It is a huge problem, and here I would say there is a parallelism between my Italian experience and my Turkish experience. And what I'm trying to do actually is to bridge my knowledge that I've been cultivated in Italy in order to present this solution here in Turkey for the city of Izmir. The problem are more or less the same. Turin has been flooded during a big cloudburst even in the late August of 2020. And Izmir has been subjected to these great flash floods during the first month of this 2021, creating a lot of problems because these kind of rain events were unpredictable in the quantity of water that falls in less than 1 hour, creating huge confusion and huge, not only confusion, but dangerous situations and even victims in the worst cases. So what is happening to that systems, and especially to Izmir? Izmir is a kind of metropolitan system that, according to the last data, has been mostly doubled in the expansion of the urban areas between 1990s and 2018s. So we are talking about 33,000 hectares urbanized, 100% more of sealed surface in the huge metropolitan systems. And if you're taking into account those raw data within the fact that the expansion occur on a pretty critical Mediterranean soil, which is not too much depth, with a low capability to infiltrate the water, with a poor permeability, and the fact that Izmir is entirely built up in high slopes and mountainous and hilly systems, you have these kind of big character and propension to be subjected to this kind of cloudburst floodings. And the entire metropolitan system is extremely sprawled into the Gulf of Izmir, which is not considering only the part of the ancient harbor of the city, where we have huge density, but even on the western part toward the direction of Urla, Çeşme, that are touristic locations, but have experienced a lot of suburbanization during the last years. So the question is the traditional HADARS model prediction working if you are dealing within the vulnerability of these extremely extended and complex systems? And if so, are we able to empirically measure how the system is vulnerable? These are my research issue. And so I was trying to define this issue, keeping in mind that the traditional riverine flooding that has been based on the peak of flows in natural systems is extremely different from the kind of cloudburst flooding that is affecting the cities of Izmir, of Turin, of New York, of Copenhagen. So it's an extremely spreaded, situation, this one of the climate change. And the answer is no, there is a big difference between the natural riverine hazard prediction and the kind of cloudburst, because we have hugely anthropized the system, not only in the dense parts of the build-up areas, but even outside. We rectify the streams, even in the mountains parts where the water should be much more infiltrated. And the more we are going to anthropize the systems, the more we are losing the possibility of the socio-ecological systems to store the water in the groundwater and having like a good recharge of the groundwater. So creating like a huge surface runoff of the streams while this kind of cloudburst happens. So I'm going to study much more in detail the runoff within certain model elaborated by the Stanford University. There is this INVEST tool of softwares. And I was trying to bridge, certain research that I've been made in Turin within Izmir, using this kind of runoff model, which use just two parameters to quantify the runoff during this kind of cloudburst, that are the land use land cover, so what is built up in the above part of the soil, and then the characteristic of the below soil, so how much the soil is porous, and so how much is the possibility and the capability of the soil to retain the water when the waters fall down from the skies during a cloudburst even. So what these models tell us and give us as an output, they give us like a biophysical quantity of the runoff index that should happen during a cloudburst event. Here, this is the output of the model, where you see the white areas are all those areas that reach 100% of the runoff. So it means that during a huge flashy rains, a single liter of water could not be stored by the soil, but it goes under a runoff process. And here the problem, and the secondary problem, is where this kind of water goes. And again, you have to use like digital modeling to understand where those streams of waters try to go during these kind of cloudburst events. And we were trying to match those two informations in order to make like a biophysical assessment. So we simulated in the model rain events of 17 millimeters, which is half of the events happens during January, just to let you know. And we assessed the fact that more than 800,000 of cube meters of water goes in runoff. So the question is the Cameralty district systems of collection of water able to store this amount of water during this kind of events? And the second issues are, can we monitor in the effect of urbanization on flooding within this kind of modeling, not only after a couple of years, but having like a continuous, a real time, dashboards, in order to be much more aware of the kind of urbanization that we are doing and the effect that is creating on the systems. And the second issue is, are we able to downscale the assessment to support urban design transformation? So to use these big informations, but put that information on the hand of urban planners, urban designer, architects who transform the cities by urban transformation projects. So that's my big challenging issue. And I'm going to answer and finish the presentation quite quickly. I think that for both issues, the answer is yes, because actually our capability within the Department of City of Regional Planning is to have a storing server that is connected with Copernicus images. This has been an image of 28th of March, but we have the last release of the 6th of June. And every 15 days, we are able to run these kind of models and look how the seasonal variation of the vulnerability to cloudburst events could be monitored and assessed. This is just like a combination of spectral bands. It's a pretty technical issue, but it's not too much, impossible to realize like in home. And this is what we are going to do to define this kind of dashboard that is able to monitor in the systems in extremely detailed and continuous way during a temporal threshold, different temporal thresholds. What concerns the second issue, and I close my presentation, is what we are going to do is try to downscale these big models, which seems to be like more linked within the landscape scale or the city scale. But sometimes when we deal with urban transformation, we want to get data in extremely detailed parsed level. This is the cadastral map of the Cameralty district. You can see how much is fragmented. And here again, to define where we have the critical areas, it's extremely difficult. Nevertheless, those models could be combined and we are able to identify with higher precisions all those plots that are much more vulnerable than others. So this means that if we have to focus the attention, and even if we have the money to invest private resources or a public one, we have to know where we have to prioritize this kind of nature-based, performance-based solution. I just conclude showing that this is the job that I'm trying to do within certain students in my studios, try to make an assessment of where we have the priority to make intervention within even small greening and depermeabilization, like in the Cameralty district, which is extremely sealed, and it's pretty difficult to find big urban transformation project. Nevertheless, what we are going to do within this kind of traditional exercise of design studios within the students that try to provide much more green with even solutions that are much more technological, green roofs, small depermeabilizations, vertical surfaces. But what is the plus of having this kind of models, that we can make this kind of comparison of the benefit between the existing solution and after the project should be implemented, like to have like different scenarios of implementation. Here we have just 4 ecosystem services, but you can see that on the right part there is this kind of rate of variation, so we can understand how creating like permeable surface for 1 or 1.5% of the entire catchment generate a benefit which is much higher. For example, the habitat quality increased that 4.6 points percent, or the flooding decrease of 2.16%. So this is a kind of empirical measurement and possibility to monitor the systems and how this kind of design solution could concretely and quite directly affect the systems in a measurable way. So thank you again for your attention. I hope to remain on my timing assignment, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stefano. That was a very interesting speech and a presentation. So, of course, I have some questions about your presentation. But before that, I want to ask the other panelists if they want to add or ask questions about the subject at first. Cristiano and Professor Ulusoy, do you have any questions about the subject?
At this moment, maybe later on we can have a joint discussion. It will be, I think it will be more fruitful. But I was very impressed with your presentation, Stefano. I'd like to learn more.
Densities really affect, really have an relation with the climate change. So, what are the main effects of the climate change in densities? First of all, I want to ask, and do we have some tools to support performance-based solutions for urban design?
Yeah, I think that here I was much more concentrated on the flooding hazard, but I think that actually when we talk about climate change, we are considering a huge amount of events that are happening in cities. I'm talking about urban heat island, for example. Izmir is a city which suffers a lot of this kind of hazard systems, but vulnerability concern also these kind of trends that we have of the expansion of the city. And despite the fact that climate change is generating much more this kind of flash flood events, cloudbursts, urban heat island, the rising of temperature, earthquake, for example, the fact that the large majority of people is concentrated on urban areas create like a high vulnerability independently on the kind of shocks that systems will be affected. So we have to take into account that in the near future, if this kind of big urbanization still continue, and it will continue, cities will become much more vulnerable to each kind of climate change happens, shocks, and so on.
I see. Is the hydraulic system of Izmir dimensioned to support such stress during cloudburst? Because you are talking about Izmir specifically, so one of the densest cities of Turkey. So, what's your opinion about that?
Actually, I'm dealing for a Horizon project with the municipality company who take care about this kind of drainage systems. And I'm wrong on that. I don't think that they stated that they don't have like models who quantifies this kind of runoff systems, but it's simple to answer to these questions because, well, Izmir is an extremely complicated system. So it's difficult to find out within a precise approximation how much is the water that should be channelized during this kind of cloudburst. What we know is that actually Izmir has not a division between the normal treatment of water and this kind of cloudburst event drainage systems. So kind of solution should be extremely needed in the next future. That's why we are trying as university to support this process of monitoring and even on transformation, because the city is transforming itself. So the possibility to change are enormous if we take into account urban transformation project. The problem is, should we link our knowledge within the practical assessments and the practical transformation? So that's the key points, to bridge the gap between scientific assessment and the practical transformation. This is my point.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stefano. It was very valuable information that you shared with us. So, of course, in practice, these studies will affect our future densities. Also, the changing educational system and the changing effects on the educational system in the name of architecture is also something to mention. So today our second panelist, Professor Dr. Zuhal Ulusoy, will present us about rising values in architectural education. So first of all, I want to present you her, Zuhal Ulusoy, who graduated from Middle East Technical University, Department of Architecture, with bachelor's degree in 1979 and master's degree in 1983. Completed her master's degree in 1987 and her PhD in 1991 in Carnegie Mellon University, USA. Department of Architecture, where she went with a Fulbright scholarship. While she was working as the head of the Department of Landscape Architecture and Urban Design at Bilkent University between 1992 and 2005, she gave lectures at the Department of Architecture at Carnegie Mellon University in 2003 to 2004 and continued her research. Ulusoy, who worked at İzmir University of Economics, Department of Architecture between 2005 and 2008, worked as the Dean of the Faculty of Art and Design until 2015 at Kadir Has University, which she started in 2008, and as the Director of Architecture and Urban Studies Master Program between 2017 to 2018. She gives lectures on urban architecture, housing, and architectural concepts, mainly at the basic design and urban design levels, and conducts master's and doctoral theses. Ulusoy, whose research focuses on design education and urban studies at various levels, especially on urban design, urban renewal and transformation, and has articles, book chapters, papers, and invited speeches on these subjects in international and national journals. He has been working at Bilgi University Faculty of Architecture since October 2018. So, Professor Ulusoy, now it's your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Arabacıoğlu. This was a very generous introduction. I feel privileged to be part of this big event and also part of this exciting panel. Thanks for the invitation. And before I start, I'd like to announce that I'm joining from Istanbul Bilgi University's Energy Museum, the control room. For those who don't know, this Central Istanbul campus used to be the power plant of Istanbul, and it's turned into a university campus for 20 years ago. So I just wanted to tell everyone if they are any curious of what's going on at the background. Okay, the title of my presentation, it's not going to be as visually pleasing as Stefano's presentation. Let me share a basic, let's see, where is that? Yeah. A very basic PowerPoint presentation. Let me turn to, okay. I guess that's visible, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll be basically reading a text, so bear with me, please. The title, as I said, is Emerging Trends in Architecture Education. And, okay, this is how I, oops, sorry. Pandemics a year and a half ago caught us educators off guard, like everyone else. Not that we don't think about the future of architecture as profession and its education routinely, but nothing of this sort was within the scope of our plans and forecasts for the near future. Within a matter of weeks, literally, we had to transfer our traditional educational system completely online. Some expected that it would turn into a spectacular failure, especially for areas like ours, where the prevailing form of education has been one-to-one, face-to-face, hands-on, practice-based, and so on. Yet, to the surprise of many, including us, we didn't fail. How was this possible? Well, though we were reluctant to admit it, technological advances have been an integral part of our profession and education for quite some time, and the fact that they were available made this overnight transition possible. It was certainly not seamless, but we managed to make the transition in the face of a global emergency. Furthermore, continued this format diligently for over a year. The thing that kept us going was probably the discovery of our capacity to adapt to change. In a sense, our resilience, and that contributed to our self-confidence, in a sense. At least for some time. As it continued, our mood declined, as many of us has been experiencing, making it more and more difficult to keep going on. The fact that transition online education to online education could happen does not necessarily mean it worked the way the distant learning models were supposed to work. We had to fit our familiar ways into unfamiliar means, trying to blend two somewhat incompatible modes of education into each other. This aspect needs further elaboration, which I will not go into now. Pandemics also forced us to think about what the essence of our education is, challenged our preconceptions, and we turned out to be the living proofs that education in other modes was possible. It became a catalyst to understand what can be done in distant mode, if there are any advantages, what can never be compensated for, and making the difference between the essential and inevitable and the alternative and replaceable ever so obvious. This led the way to an abundance of academic and professional events focusing on the future of design and architecture and their education, platforms for sharing experiences, and all at a global scale. Never in history was there such a congruence of interest, most probably. There were a couple of conferences I had joined and I'd like to share with you, like European Association of Architecture Education had this Dean's Summit, and the primary theme was reinterpretation of architecture's future within the framework of this recent experience. Association of Colleges Schools of Architecture, the organization in the United States, had this pivot on online learning series of lectures. There was an informal gathering organized by a young scholar on the first year design education. He's part of a university in Ankara, where architecture educators from all over Turkey met on a regular basis for months. And it was a very exciting and intriguing and very informative way of gathering, which was not precedented before. It was a very unusual and very fruitful occasion. And Turkish Chamber of Architects Istanbul branch organized a series of events. They were called E-State of Profession, Education, Construction, and so on. The issue was common. The future that awaits us and our responsibilities to prepare ourselves and students for it. At all platforms, the participants tried to keep a calm distance to the situation and discussed it from an objective perspective. Other than these events, of course, there has been numerous articles, position papers, reviews regarding this common issue. We learned from all of them, and we still keep learning. As in many areas, architecture education is not only transfer of knowledge, nor is it solely the production of design projects, which is commonly misunderstood among us educators. Education in architecture, in the broadest sense, is the construction and transfer of professional and disciplinary culture and know-how to the forthcoming generation of professionals. This transfer of culture entails code of conduct, shared values, networking, establishing contacts and friendships. Acknowledging the value and essence of these attributes, we have to admit that distance learning cannot compensate for many of them, particularly the value of spontaneity, role of serendipity that is only possible in a real space is indispensable. I'd like to briefly expand on this point. Past years' experience did also challenge the relevance and validity of universities as educational institutions. We started to speculate about alternative modes of education, training, formation that are less institutional, curricula that are custom designed by students or learners who decide about what to learn, choose among a variety of courses that are available through numerous organizations. This inevitably raises the question of assessment of professional qualifications, and the licensing of eligibility of practice. Obviously, we cannot rely on the so-called invisible hand of the market on this issue. Professions are bound by legal frameworks, and liability and accountability are the essence of the practice. Thus, we can speculate that even if learning can be achieved in alternative ways, maybe out of universities, there has to be measures to assess the quality, probably via independent bodies and organizations. This opens up other debates, obviously, which should be done elsewhere in some other context, but they are worth dwelling on. I will continue my talk about referring to two sources about the current trends in architecture and the future of education. At the start of the pandemics, as I was trying to relate our profession and its education to this unprecedented issue, I came across with an interesting source. It's not a new article, it's from January 2017, but it touches upon the points that we had to face, especially over the last year and a half. The title of the article, as you see, is Emerging Trends That Will Shape the Future of Architecture. Before we contemplate the practice of the future, we must sharpen the tools we have at hand. You can see the internet link. It's by TMD Studio, Architecture Visualization. It's a London and Prague-based group of young professionals operating within the fields of architecture, visualization, interior design, and research. The premise of their argument is, and I quote, "Over the last 2 decades, the construction industry has been subject to dramatic changes, paving the way for a future in which traditional spatial concepts are no longer valid. Now, compost is being used for building materials. Craft mining and collaborative design have been increasing the popular approaches to architecture projects. There's a focus on the importance of green infrastructure and energy efficiency, and the line between private and public space is becoming increasingly blurred." Here you see only the first words, the first keywords for the list of changes that they are referring to. Okay, and the other one is an initiative. It's called the Future of Design Education Initiative. And again, you can see the internet link. It's a full-fledged independent design research, design education initiative with themes, categories, pedagogical principles, steering committee workshops, volunteers, sponsor organizations such as University of California, San Diego Design Lab, IBM, World Design Organization, and so on. Their motto is, again, and I quote, to create design education for the 21st century that will equip designers with the skills and perspectives to design more inclusive, sustainable, equitable, and responsible future products, systems, organizations, and societies. So the scope of practice they refer to is quite wider than what we have been doing traditionally. Criticizing the established mode of design education within universities, they argue that design education needs to change to provide an in-depth, evidence-driven academic foundation for our design decisions and to help designers to become advocates for social and environmental responsibility. And they follow as, again, quote, designers today are often asked to address new kinds of problems at scales quite different from those of the past. Increasingly, design problems focus less on discrete artifacts for communication and manufacture, and more on a diverse range of design processes, services, systems, and communities. Designers need a different kind of education to be able to address these issues. After giving these examples, I will wrap up soon. And there are similar examples, of course. I would like to offer an approach that somehow tries to interrelate the above changes and concerns and combine them into a model, if you will. As I see it, there are two major trends, two axes of change that await us, one about the tools and means, and the other is about the contents. What I mean by tools and means is the exponentially increasing potential of digital universe, big data, mapping, distant learning, digital design, maker culture, robotic production, and so on. And about the content, what I mean is the vulnerability of the earth, damages, consumption of resources, extinction of species, climate change, Anthropocene era, natural disasters, large-scale migrations due to wars and climate crises, and so on. The reflection of these two trends can be observed in almost all disciplines, not only limited to design disciplines as ours, all walks of life. And the way to deal with them starts with the recognition that they are interrelated and they have to be addressed, scrutinized, discussed through multidisciplinary approaches. I argue that this is the future of design education. This is the future of design education, and this is where it lies. Comprehending the complexity of the problems and expanding, exploring the potentials of the tools and means to be used to solve them. Let's not forget that technology is only a tool, a bundle of means, no matter how endless their potentials may be. It's only as effective as you make it accessible, fair, just, humane, respectful of species, conscientious about the world with all its beings. Thus, within this perspective, I will state what I understand is the mission of education, and it is the nurturing a particular kind of mindset, not necessarily teaching content. It is about taking position and, if necessary, shifting of gear. Here I will list some key qualifications and attributes and characteristics, sensibilities that would be the outcome of education as I see it. Being ethical, being respectful of values and principles and following them. Responsible, being responsible of both professionally as citizens and human beings. Being modest, being humble, accepting that we don't have the right and legitimacy to make decisions that will affect people and areas and nature that are beyond our means. And resilience, the capacity to foresee the changes and be ready to adapt to them and maybe lead them. And as a final note, going back to the beginning, the statement I made at the very start, that we didn't fail refers to only privileged few who had the access to these means and tools. So the proliferation of means is nothing if not coupled with the content and values, the second axis of change, and it is urgent. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ulusoy, for your very valuable speech, and you have mentioned the main factors of the emerging values in architectural education right now. So while you are speaking, I wondered, what are the current challenges in design and architecture and their education right now? For example, pandemics is a very surprising effect, has a very surprising effect, mostly on the field of education, for the professionals of the field of education like us. What did the pandemics show about our practice of architecture education? What are your thoughts about that?
Probably the biggest challenge for architecture design in their education is educational institutions are slow to change. They are probably far too established. Life sort of leads us to make the changes, but the institutional structures, the policies and the power structures, of course, are very difficult to adapt to that. So that's probably the biggest challenge. The interesting thing is that this cumbersome structure, this institutional structure, was challenged with the start of the pandemic. And it was a very big surprise to all of us, including myself, that this bulk of institutional structure could make this swift change to a different mode of instruction. But as I said in my talk, what we did was trying to fit the new tools that we have been getting accustomed to the old means that we were running business. We continued conducting the studios the way we are accustomed to do. We conducted the lectures the way we are accustomed to do, but with distant mode. So that actually there is a big opportunity and also a responsibility in that sense, that two things about the technology that allows us to do these and the education, they have to fit to each other, and we have to change the content to be able to use the technology and its means more efficiently. that's what I think about that question.
Thank you. You mentioned about the tools and means and also the content as well as your presentation and your answer. How in the means of content will pandemic change the architecture? What do you foresee about that?
Well, the thing is, maybe I wasn't that clear about that. I'm not only referring to architecture, I'm talking about the built environment and the unbuilt one, the natural one. So when we talk about architecture, we usually tend to limit our vision to the scope of the projects that we're dealing with, not much paying attention to the natural and societal and political consequences that lead from there. So what I'm trying to formulate is we have to recognize that there is more to it. Architecture has a lot of power, and we have to take the responsibility of having that kind of power. But then again, learning how to be modest. Designing something doesn't mean you're the god, right?
Yes. That's a very important point there you are stressing.
A big supporter of that. We have to be humble. And the quality that we need to make the students acquire is this adaptability to change, this resilience, and we have survived that. That's an important thing, and that ability to change. Because institutions, when you teach, think about the immediate graduation, but the capacities and the properties that we have to teach the students has to make them valid and usable and effective. I don't know, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. It's not content. That's what I'm saying. You cannot teach the content from 20 years from now, but you have to. The students have to be, the graduates have to be adaptable and keen on recognizing what's going on and probably leading them instead of following those changes desperately.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Ulusoy. And I'm going to present our next panelist right now, Cristiano Lucetti. He's PhD fellow in civil and environmental and building engineering and architecture at UPM, Università Politecnica della Marche. He holds a master's in architecture from Pennsylvania State Art University and laurea in architectura from Chieti Università di Annunzio. He is a registered architect with extensive experience leading the design of large-scale projects in the residential, commercial, and hospitality industries in Europe, China, India, and Middle East and Southeast Asia. Cristiano has taught architectural, urban design, professional practice and drawing for over 15 years in Europe, North America and Middle East. His students' work has been widely published and now has won many international awards as well. He is one of the founders of Laboratorio Architectura Nomade, a non-profit association founded in 2004 for the research and dissemination of art and architecture. As associate editor of Compass Architecture and Design magazine, Cristiano writes regularly about Middle Eastern architecture and urban development. He frequently serves as a jury member for reviews, international competitions, and architectural awards. Cristiano created the Egyptian Pavilion at the 2018 Architecture Venice Biennale, which was shortlisted in the World Architecture Festival 2018 Projects Exhibited category and won honorary award at the 2018 Cairo Design Award. And Cristiano Lucetti will now present on Theo van Doesburg, Aldo Rossi, and architecture criticism in the Gulf. So, Cristiano, now you have the word. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, for the presentation. It's always such a great pleasure to collaborate with my Turkish friends. I miss you all very much visiting Turkey. I hope this will be, something that I will do soon. I will have a chance to go back. And today, I'm kind of questioning after the invitation how I can be as Italian as possible in this context, due to the title of the event. And my idea was to bring something that I consider very peculiar and specific of being an Italian architect, which is the idea that architecture can be criticized. We are members of a very important school of architecture. Italy, has so many examples of great architects and architecture, but in the modern time, we had some few difficulties. And we are so many architects. It's like there is one architect every 250 people in population of architects. You will expect that this will reflect into a built environment that actually shows this kind of quality, and it's not the case. We're actually much better at producing the criticism of architecture, which is the middle stage between designers and the public and the audience. And now, being part of that category of architects and architectural critics, I wonder, where is the architectural criticism in the context where I operate? I'm based in Dubai. I work here in the Middle East since many years, and I kind of noticed that this architectural criticism, it's definitely lacking from what I see. So, so my presentation is called, titled on Theo van Desburg, Aldo Rossi, and Architectural Criticism in the Gulf, or why there is a need for regional architectural criticism. And I will start quoting Antonio Gramsci, where he says, "I hate the indifferent. I believe that living means taking sides. Those who really live cannot help being a citizen, partisan. Indifference and apathy are parasitism, perversion, not life. That is why I hate the indifferent. Indifference is the dead weight of history." And I will use this approach that is very cinematographic by using the technique of flashback. So flashback number one, it's in Weimar, Germany, April 1921. Theo van Desburg leaves Holland and moves to Weimar. Artist and theorist of the Dutch De Stijl, invited by Gropius, began teaching at the Bauhaus. The collision between his radical neoplastic ideas and expressionist teachers is immediate. Van Desburg is forced to leave, but begins offering alternative figurative and applied arts classes. Many students drop out of official school courses, and the new neoplastic ideas begin to spread even among young teachers. The cultural clash culminates with Van Desburg's estrangement from the community for reasons of public order. Still, his theoretical legacy greatly influences the work of the modernist masters, starting with Mies van der Rohe. His Barcelona pavilion is indeed the manifesto of neoplastic architecture. Flashback number two, Pescara, Italy, October 1988. I entered the large classroom where is scheduled the presentation of the first year of architecture. I've just long rows of green plastic chairs stand between the professor's desk and me. There are 250 students in my class. I can still see a large drawing made in felt tip pen on the plaster of the wall next to the large blackboard from a distance. A circumference circumscribes 3 towers. They remind me of medieval architecture. At the top of each, there is a triangular flag. At the bottom, there is Rossi, no grazie. Aldo Rossi, no thanks. I wonder if Aldo Rossi is some character who's not very nice, who's hanging around that building. I soon learned exponents, not only architectural, the tendenza, the architectural movement that in the 70s sprang from his ideas and saw Pescara as one of its strongholds, was beginning to suffer in-depth criticism. Young professors trusted Rossi's typological traditionalism and proposed new urban architectural theories. In the 90s, this small architecture school became a cultural factory due to this academic tension. It was the privileged place clash between different ideologies in which students attended and participated passionately. At that time, I saw students using a Walkman to record the teachers' animated discussions along the university's corridors. Press time, Dubai, January 2021. The whole world is on the eve of a restart after the catastrophe of the pandemic. After the panic caused by the March 2020 lockdowns, everyone hopes that vaccines will bring the world back to a dimensions of normalcy. The effects of the pandemic are felt on a global and consequently local scale. Dubai, always very sensitive to sudden changes in the world economy, is suffering from a crisis that had already begun short caused by the Expo 2020's award. The most prominent urban development agents stopped their construction activities to counteract a dizzying depreciation of properties. Their original value exceeded the 30% loss in just. During the crisis of 2009, architectural products of low design value are the first to suffer from the lack of potential end users. In the shortage of design opportunities, it is best architecture that wins the few possibilities. Scarcity always favors quality. Achieving a high quality of the architectural offer and consequently of the entire built environment cannot fail to involve the local designers, thinkers, and cultural institutions, especially the schools of architecture. Rare publication that survived the decay of print media, and some regional webzines have attempted to build an apparatus to support the built environment's cultural development. I often participated as a juror in numerous awards organized by the local industry. They represent fundamental dissemination and promotional agents of the industry. Still, they do not seem to establish qualitative hierarchies able to influence the architectural trends. Generally, the debate is limited to celebrating alleged excellence. It also tends to avoid critical positions towards design operations of dubious nature and sometimes very low quality. Numerous events related to the construction industry include experts who discuss the status quo and propose solutions for the future without a real critical reflection. Finally, in the historical era in which it seems to be mandatory to express unsolicited comments on social media, the regional architectural debates are completely absent. Architects are continually flooding the digital platform with images of the work. Still, the comments content is always limited to generic compliments, if not showing just a series of childish emoticons. Therefore, regional context seems to suffer from the lacking of genuine architectural criticism that is placed between, on the one hand, customers and designers, and on the other, public opinion. Architectural criticism must be able to build a debate through evaluation of qualities and deficiencies of a particular architecture. In the historical moment of the restart, after the pandemic's global tragedy, regional cultural figures' contribution must promote quality and acceptable parameters. In this light, I think that the cultural solipsism, in some extreme cases even snobbery, shown by some architectural schools is no longer acceptable. Students must be engaged in a highly perhaps revolutionary cultural debate. They must be endowed with the necessary critical skills to formulate appropriate solutions to global and local issues. The initiative that puts students in contact with professionals and government entities must be events delegated to individual endeavors. It is also essential that architecture teachers coming from cultures other than the indigenous one will stop being perched on their own cultural identities to develop an in-depth knowledge of the environmental conditions in which one operates to avoid, above all, unacceptable cultural colonialism. Architecture cannot be properly taught in an unfamiliar context. The purpose of architectural educators is to understand the regional context within the global dimension and to equip students with the necessary knowledge to design a sustainable cultural environment for the benefit of the whole community. The own light enjoyed by urban architectural culture is no longer sufficient to illuminate the scenario. The restart must include a profound reflection on the design role in regional, cultural, and environmental development. And
thank you, Cristiano. That was a very inspiring presentation. While the word is always open for the other panelists if they want to ask any questions or add anything, but by the way, I want to ask a question for you about the subject. Could you elaborate more on architectural discourse in the Gulf? Because you are talking about the need of shift in sustainability with the Dubai architecture especially.
Well, you know, this goes back to the idea of in which society we operate, right? I listened with lots of attention and lots of interest to Professor Ulusoy's speech and story, but I was wondering in which context this kind of architecture changes in architectural education will happen, because contexts are very different, you know. And in the context of the Gulf, where the freedom of expression is not as we think it is, maybe in Europe or in Turkey or in other places, then this goes together with the idea of not being able to actually criticize operations that might be constructively criticized to produce a better stage, better ideas, better design, better architecture to the benefit of the society. So obviously, when we think, I also cover partially the idea of how to intervene in architectural education. I think that this idea of escaping of architectural schools and architectural education toward the use of technologies per se as an end of itself, it's really trying to don't engage with the society issues. And that is I think is the basic issue of the loss of power of architects. And you know, like more and more the role of architects and the teaching of architectural design is less important in the urban development. And so it becomes some sort of almost a decoration moment, you know, of processes that are decided on a different scale and different level. And so I think that if there is a restart, which is also the topic of this meeting, of this talk, I think we should really look into this approach and see if, as academicians, as scholars, as people, I'm talking for myself, that I stopped design and started writing, it's the moment to push toward, to elevate a level of architectural criticism that is be there on a guard to see if the architectural proposal in the contemporary time is good enough for this society.
So, from a perspective of the educator or from a young architect's perspective, do you think the lack of architectural criticism, as you described, has implications for the everyday practice of young architects?
Definitely, definitely, because you can see that if the education is not aligned with the stories that they told, with a moment of contrast, even within the universities, you know, where different way of thinking clash together, and that's where the knowledge is produced, then young architects will take criticism as something that is not welcome, you know, it's something that is disturbing the driver somehow. And that's extremely dangerous, because if you eliminate that level of revolutionaryism from the young age of architects, then there is no progress, you know? And so that's extremely important as a theme, to bring back this idea. And this should be somehow the first step has to be created, the environment by the administrators of school. Teachers are not enough, because teachers are under the administrators, and administrators must take this risk somehow. And that way, that will stimulate a discussion, the discourse that will bring a very stimulating environment, cultural environment, where the new progress, new ideas, and new application of architectural theories and practice will take place.
Oh, thank you, Cristiano. Before concluding this panel, our panelists have made presentations about the main theme of Italian Design Days. First, Dr. Stefano Salata has presented designing performance-based solutions to reduce ecosystem vulnerability, where he actually faced us with the reality of the densities and the relations with its climate change. So afterwards, Professor Dr. Ulusoy presented emerging values in architectural education. So how are we trying to deal with these facts, these realities in the from the educational perspective? And afterwards, Cristiano Lucetti has presented a provocative, I say, with a provocative presentation on Teoman Dozberg, Alderossi, and architecture criticism in the Gulf. He mentioned how architecture is changing, evolving in the recent times, and how a restart should be done. What kind of restart is necessary for a sustainable future? And I want to thank all of the panelists for today's presentations, which I find very inspiring by myself. And as you see, we are all in a very virtual environment, even though we are in our physical environments right now. We are not together, so some things are really changing by nature rather than our plans. So hope to see you in person and hope to do such a pleasing panel in person next year. So see you all soon. Have a nice day. Healthy day.
Thank you very much. It was very mind-opening for
Thank
all
you.
of us. Thank you.
Thank you, even by my side. Yeah.
Thank you.
See you soon and bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
See
you
you.
very much. Bye.